Thank you so much. That's a very hard act to follow. I promise I don't have any jokes, but we hope to be as engaging as the last session. Jeff Bezos said, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. In terms of an employer brand, it's what your people say about you when you're not in the room. Initially considered the ice cream and balloons, the bean bags and pool tables at the office, employer branding today has really been a tool that's been leveraged by organizations to achieve their strategic goals. So our panel today is a great cross-section of the entire ecosystem. We have technology giants, we have a startup founder. So just diving right into it, thank you everyone for being part of this panel. I'm going to start off with a bad word, bear with me, the Great Resignation. I'm going to follow it up with another one, attrition. So Rama, starting with you, how have employee needs changed over the time?
First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, so thank you for the opportunity. I think as companies have started to think about diversity and inclusion, the workforce itself has become very diverse. As a result, what flexibility means, what employees' needs have also become diverse. So there's no one way of packaging how to attract an employee or get them to stay with you. So at SAS, first of all, it starts with our CEO. We've always been a very people-centric company with a lot of focus in people. Everything for us revolves around people. And we have a very strong, what we call an EVP, which is how do we package what we have holistically that suits the needs of the kind of people that we attract. So we've been putting together different personas based on what our needs are and trying to match it with the candidates that we try to seek. So to your question, earlier people were just happy with compensation and basic benefits. But the reason I said as the workforce gets diverse, the entire requests and requirements have changed is there's no one definition of what people want. Flexibility itself has a very broad definition. So if I'm a young working mother, creche is my definition, or proximity to creche is the definition of flexibility. But if I am taking care of elders, the definition of flexibility is very different. So we have tried to map those needs and create something so that we can attract people.
Can I add?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, pandemic has made a significant change in what's happening in a people's life. Pre-pandemic, people used to work from office every day, Monday to Friday. If they want to have some work, then they want to work from home. They have to take a manager's permission to take a work from home. But in pandemic, it became completely reverse. That if you have to come to office, you have to take a manager's permission to come to office. Otherwise, everything was work from home. And then obviously, slowly now we all got fed up working from home. So it is now becoming more a hybrid way of working because pandemic is still around. And during COVID, employees realized that family life and the friends life are equally important than the work only. So they realized that those things are important. Some of them thought that it is better to be with the parents in a tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, etc. And since it is a work from home, I can sit in any partner of the India or a world and start doing the work and make my presence felt and keep on doing the work. So they moved to a class B, class C cities, and now they don't want to come back. So so employee needs have changed that I can work from anywhere, anytime kind of a thing. And now employer has to come to the employees too. And you would be reading in last 3-4 months in a newspaper saying that all the large system integrators have started going to tier 2 cities and started opening the offices there. So the first time I'm seeing that employers are going where employees are, where in the past it was completely reverse. And third thing which has changed is with the Great Resignation, what you're talking about, the employees have started realizing that if the life is quote unquote short, let me do a work at a place which I like, and she spoke about EVP. Employer branding becomes extremely important. So I want to work for the best of the organization at the best of the work and the best of the compensation. And then the resignation started happening significantly because in pandemic, the work has gone up significantly. You would have seen the way the IT industry has moved and the kind of a revenue growth which is being coming in, everybody, in, especially in a system integrator market, is delivering excess of 20% growth. And that was unheard of in the past kind of a thing. So obviously, large requirement, demand supply challenges, which is obviously making employees to realize that employer branding becomes quite important.
And that's a great point, Kiran. And Anshuman, I want to come to you about that. A lot of it has changed, but employers are changing as well. But when we talk about things like flexibility, and Rama mentioned comp and Ben and perks, a lot of this has now become table stakes. It's COVID and the Great Resignation has really leveled the playing field, and it's a great equalizer. So how do you go beyond just the table stakes in terms of creating a strong employer brand?
Yeah, I think just to build on the previous question also and connect to it, I feel like the self-awareness, right, has really gone up, right? When you think of joining a company, it's not just about getting to a workplace, but it's also about understanding who I am and what I really believe in from a values perspective, and how do I connect that with the company that I'm going to join. So I think that the expectations that people have out of themselves and also from the workplace has evolved, right? And so I think that is what we probably need to understand better. I mean, every company has a unique culture, right? But how do you project that culture is completely dependent on the company, right? And the culture is manifested through employee experience. And that is something you can be intentional about, and you can also be unintentional about, right? Because the perception that the employees have about you, whether they are the present employee or going to be a future employee, is all based on those employee experiences. So whenever they get in touch with the company in some way or form, they actually start creating a perception, right? And I feel like companies have to be more intentional about creating those experiences, because it's no longer you have to do your work and everything else kind of follows. So I think the more intentional we can be as a company about our brand and what this company really stands for, talk about our mission and why we exist as a company and how we are really driving customer innovation, and that is helping, kind of change lives. I think that becomes very important.
Great.
Overall.
Absolutely. Chaitanya, that's a great segue to you, because you've done something that a lot of brands have not been able to do at WakeFit, is to really create employee experiences that have kind of become viral in that sense. You have a lot of advocacy from your employees, a lot of earned media about it. But how do you choose what facets, like Anshuman and Rama were talking about, how do you choose what to anchor on? How do you choose what aspect of your employee value proposition to market in order to create a strong employer brand?
Sure. So just some context for you all. We are just, I think the lady and the gentleman on the stage, they've come from companies which range from about 15 years to about 46 years. And they have a long legacy to live up to. We as a 6-year-old startup with 1,000 crore revenue, 23 warehouses, 7 factories, working across multiple functions, do not have a legacy to fall back on. And in fact, that has become our strength, where we are constantly pushing the boundaries on what we can and can't do with respect to every part of the business. And Rama touched upon certain aspects, and I think all of those things that all of them made were very valid. But one angle that I want to bring up is also about the different generations. 20 years ago when I started my career, if I was having a bad day, I was expected to suck it up and put through a normal 8-hour work day. Today, when somebody has a bad day, they want a mental health day. Times have changed. What people want from an organization have changed. And what people want from life has changed. So I guess companies have to also adapt. And what generation gap of the workforce used to be about 8-10 years earlier, it's now just 2-3 years. You meet somebody who's joining today, you will feel that they're from a very different planet altogether. You don't use the smartphone like they do. You don't use the device, laptops like they do. You do not use any aspect of the same world the way that they use. So the one single point that I want to leave you with is that to pick the facet of the business that you want to anchor your employee value proposition on, it should be authenticity. For us, the right to nap policy that went crazy viral, where we said every single employee can take a nap between 2 and 2:30 p.m. every single day. That got so much love on LinkedIn. primarily because that's the reason why we exist as a company. We exist as a sleep company, we exist as a home company. And hence, when we did something to that, to help our employees to recenter themselves, to meditate, take a break, go for a smoke break, breathe, do whatever they want, at their liberty, that suddenly rang true. It wasn't something that we were doing just for the sake of PR. So I think authenticity of what you stand for should probably be the basis of what you can start on.
And you touched upon an interesting aspect about legacy, and I want to bring it to the rest of the panel who do have legacy in their brands. Has there been, traditionally even technology companies have heroed product and service, but now with newer age companies, the focus is on people. Sometimes it's been intuitive, but it may not have been intentional in communication. Have you had to reshape your narrative when it comes to employer branding and the impact it's creating for your organizations?
I can. So as I said, we've always been a very people-centric company. But having said that, I'll go back to what I first said. Definition of what is important has changed over time. And I think he touched on it, all of them have touched. And we are very unique because we have a very wide generation as well. I think if we look at our teams across the world, our median is very high compared to most tech companies. So our narrative had to be rewritten so that it suits different personas. We just couldn't take the same thing, work-life balance. That's almost a given. But trying to fit different people in different geographies and make sure we can address their needs became very important for us. So narrative had to change. We have many more sites that talk about employee well-being, things that talk about take a break, sites that talk about, what is work-life balance, why you need to think about curiosity, what is innovation, does that fit you? So our narratives on what is meaningful has evolved over time.
And just to extend that a bit, does that change as per geography, as as per culture, as per location, as per generation? Do you need to alter that to come back to Chaitanya's point of what's important to them?
We've created personas and we do have messaging that kind of suit different geographies and also different generations. So while our policies are global, we do have a very local touch to how we deploy it.
And then one important thing which has changed, especially for the larger organization or a legacy organization he was talking about, it was always few years back or pre-COVID was customer first approach. So customer advocacy, customer net promoter scores, or were the critical and everybody was rallying behind those things. And if you have a customer, then you have a growth available. Now the entire thing has got reversed. It is all about if you have a talent available, then you will get customers and you will get a growth. So talent has become more, or employee first approach, which we heard many years back, had now become an important thing. And obviously we will join a company because of salary, benefits, perk, etc. But how you experience those things, and after that, what happens to your career, what's the work environment is all about, what's the company culture becomes extremely important. And that is what even now a CEO has started focusing on. I have seen in the past CEOs have started talking about what is the onboarding policy or process or approach every department has. What is the day one experience which is there, which was never ever the case in the past by the CEO. CEO always used to focus upon how the revenue growth is coming in, how the CSAT are improving, but the discussion have completely changed. Now it is about onboarding, it is about retention, it is about experience, it is about advocacy. So entire discussion in last 2 years have significantly changed.
Anshul, I want to come to you on a point, and I think that's something that's been raised by the panel, that employer branding does require a large amount of personalization, taking into consideration employee value proposition. It sometimes intuitively looks, it's kind of positioned on the other end of the spectrum of operational excellence, where we're talking about systemization. Where do you find the balance between personalization and systemization without compromising either?
Yeah, maybe I can use an example out of India, right? I think when you look at personalization, the first employer brand campaign that we actually, as a company, launched was in India, right? And then it was called I Am Into It campaign. Very simple, you kind of just talk about the company and then you attach yourself to the values that really kind of resonate with you. And so I was meeting the engineers, and we had a nice creative for it. And there were like some 8 or 10 engineers in that creative. And when I was talking to other set of folks, they were like, hey, Anshuman, I missed out on this opportunity to be in this creative. How could I be in this creative? And that is the aspect of personalization that you have to think about, right? It's not about just kind of projecting something about the company. It's about how do you make each and every employee experience that particular moment, right? And so we had this challenge, and we looked at how do we really scale, right? We had more than 500 employees at that time, and we said, okay, can we create something with the help of technology? And we actually created a web app where people could take their picture and then they could attach it to that creative and personalize it and share it on their social. I mean, very simple kind of technique that we employed, but the insight that we got out of that campaign was that whatever you try to do at a company level, you have to think of scaling, and at the same time, you have to personalize it for each and every individual. So I feel like both aspects are important, but the more you can create scale and personalization at the same time, I think it becomes more relevant for people, because I don't want to share a creative which I feel like I'm not part of, but I would like to share a creative which I'm part of, which I can own.
Sure. I just want to shift gears a little bit, and at each of your companies, the employer branding mandate is nested under different functions. So who takes the onus, and who should take the onus for employer branding, and which parts of it should be centralized versus localized? Chaitanya, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. We have about 1,500 full-time employees and about 2,500 part-time on contract. If you look at the cross-section of them, you will find laborers, machine operators, customer delight executives, marketing, data science, technology, operations. You'll find the whole spectrum. And employee branding and what it means to each of them is very, very different. For example, we are one of the few companies where ESOPs are granted even to shop floor executives and our customer-facing executives, no matter which department or what seniority they are in. If they have delivered for Wakefit, they're going to be eligible for ESOPs. If the second thing that I want to talk about is these campaigns, crazy campaigns that we do. For example, when IKEA opened up in Bangalore, we took out front page ad said, Wakefit try Kia. And the whole ad was in Swedish. And when they scanned the QR code, it went to our website, where it basically took pot shots at Sweden and said, you're welcome to Bangalore, but this is our home base. So the other thing we did was sleep internship, which again was very crazy. And across the cross-section of all our employees, across all of these departments, somewhere or the other they hear about these things and they associate it as this is the company that is trying to do something that is out of the ordinary. So that's the only association that they take of. But it means very different things for different people. So if we consistently do the same thing, in our company, it is, as a small 6.5-year-old company, we do not have the ability or luxury to, as large companies, to say thousands of people are applying. My job is to weed out people and get the right people. As a small company, we have to draw out the funnel in such a way that we are building a tribe of people who are self-selecting to be part of the company. We are not trying to weed out anybody. It has to be self-selection through the process and what we stand for. And hence, every single one of these press releases or articles or crazy things that we do establishes as a place to go there if you need learning, if you want to do something that is crazy out there, if you want to do something that you're proud of, in any of the fields. So we could not do one campaign for tech, one campaign for data science, primarily because we are a very diverse company in such a small workforce headcount. So that's how we approached it. And hence, for us, the starting point was authenticity. The second point was to do these crazy things that establishes our persona as somebody who's willing to push the boundaries. So if you are such a person, come join us, and you will find enriching experience.
You talked about something really interesting about creating a tribe. And Rama, I want to come to you because we had an initial conversation about this, about the recalibration of the employee life cycle as well. Initially, the expectation was that people would stay at a company for a really long time. But when you do invest in things to create a tribe and this process of self-selection, how do you justify cost to people who who are now saying that employees are no longer staying at their companies that long?
Yeah, I think in some sense, to me, it's a new normal. If you go back 30 years, it was a given that most people will stay with the company for years. Most probably they'll start there and retire there. In fact, if I look at our company, we are 45-year-old company. Pretty much everybody started as an intern and has retired with us. Okay? And we are seeing the change, and we've never seen the kind of resignation that we are seeing in recent times. It's very small compared to rest of the industry, but for us it's very high. And what we have also figured is people's needs and expectations has evolved over time. So we also need to evolve, and that's why I kind of touched on it at the beginning, is we have moved towards a persona-based approach to candidates and employees that we are trying to retain. The company has some goals. There is something that we need to take to the market. Employees are very important to us, and we want to do what we can to make sure our needs and the employee needs fit very well. Having said that, we do recognize most of them will not stay with us forever. We are gearing up for that. And our entire onboarding process, the way we train people, retrain, has had to go through a change to take care of this new normal. Is most probably people will stay with you 3 to 4 years. In a place like India, it's shorter. Maybe in the US, it's going to be 7, 8 years. So somewhere the average is about 3 years. And everything that we do in terms of training, ramp up, etc., is evolving towards that.
Adnan, in larger IT companies, still it is believed that the attrition is a temporary phenomenon, and it will die down over a period of time, and it may not come to the old normal, but it will be a improved normal than a currently new normal which is being talked about. So obviously the aim is, like I told you about, employees in a larger companies wants to go to the place where employees want to be there. So in a tier 2 companies, somebody has gone to Calcutta, somebody has gone to Bhubaneswar or gone to Vijayawada or Madurai, etc., etc. Can we set up a large offices there rather than depending on Bangalore's and Hyderabad's and Pune's and Chennai's of the world? So that is one big change which has happened. Onboarding is becoming extremely critical. So how can you give an experience of onboarding? In the past, if a junior employee joins, he or she will work 7/24 in a shift, will have a desktops. Now you are sitting at home, you will get a good laptop. I have seen on LinkedIn people flashing about, I have got a Mac because I have joined a new company. That was not the scenario in the past at all, and Mac is seen as a pride product associated with me as a brand kind of a thing. So that has got changed. Retention is becoming extremely important. There are new ways of retention is being worked out. For example, I remember a large system integrator used to hire a lot of BSc grads and had tied up with the BITS Pilani and VIT so that they can offer a MS degree to them. So Monday to Friday, they will work, and then Saturday they will study over a period of 4 years. So it is a win-win for institute, for the employees and the organization, that there is a continuity of 4 years which is available. Recently, I saw an ad in newspaper where another system integrator has now started taking a 12th grad, 12th pass out engineers, and then have similar done a tie-up so that they will work and they'll become an engineer over a 4-year period. So that will give a 4 years of continuity. So there are new innovations which are happening, and the approach to the retaining employees are getting significantly changed, besides focusing on how benefit can be done, perks can be done, how mentorship can happen. Those are the given things, but a new way of working is being spoken about.
Great points. And Anshuman, coming to you, Kiran talked about retention, and I think that's important because I think a lot of the employer branding focus sometimes is on one part of the equation, which is the attraction. But the retention and engagement is as, if not more critical, and also extending that beyond at separation to create advocates. What are you all doing specifically for the second half of the equation in terms of the retention, engagement, and advocacy?
Yeah, I would say, I think for us, employer branding in itself is about storytelling, right? And so how do you tell the story in a very authentic way? And that is where we feel like our employees are our biggest brand champions, right? And so when we think of employer brand, we think of our employees as the storytellers for us. And for that to happen, you actually have to make sure that whatever you are sharing externally is believable internally. Right, so you cannot go and project something about the company which your own employees don't really align with, right? So I think you have to be very authentic in terms of who you are as a company, what you really stand for, and then what do you go and say outside? Because that is something that is not just watched externally, but also watched internally. So for us, because that is the premise that we have around brand storytelling and employer branding, so we start with our employees. And the way we try to do it is to bring our employees close to our culture. And that is what some of us, like from a marketing, communication perspective, we try to create those experiences, right? Because it's very important for an employee to come and understand who this company is, or what this company is all about, what is the culture. And then once they understand that culture, then they start believing in that particular company or that culture. So I think for us, from a marketing perspective, our first interface is to create those experiences that bring people close to our culture. And I think from there on, how do you then shift the onus of storytelling to the employees? And that's also very critical, because you can't just ask employees to go and share anything on social media or externally. And there could be certain challenges there, like what would they say? What are they comfortable with, right? Would they say something which is probably not aligned with the company philosophy? So you have to actually create those kind of platforms which will make people their lives very easy to go and share those stories. So I think from a overall perspective, when we think of employer brand, we actually feel like it's not just a talent attraction tool. It's also a talent retention tool, because it helps you bring the company closer to the employees so that they start believing in it, and then they become the ambassadors of the brand.
Great point. And you actually touched upon my third bad word for the day, which is social media. The distance between employers and employees has drastically reduced. We talked about dissonance between internal and external. The number of touch points has also drastically changed. Chaitanya, how do you use social media? We talked about it on the positive aspect of leveraging it to tell authentic stories, but there is a downside to social media as well. How do you navigate that in terms of your employer brand, and how do you recover from that in cases where it's not worked out for you?
I think, like you rightly said, we've done a bunch of social media campaigns, and we've been very, very fortunate to have all of them go viral. But it's also a very thin line where it can go horribly wrong very quickly. So that's the reason we always say that it's okay to try out things that are completely out of your comfort zone. And when the whole organization is trying out something like that, and we are very humble enough to go and say that, yeah, I tried this. If this didn't work out, I apologize. And even when, you should see some of the times that there'll be a great, amazing campaign or a great employee posting something positive about the company that they have felt genuinely, and there's a customer posting Nietzsche saying that this company is fraud. They didn't deliver my product. It's 3 days late. So when companies do face such kind of backlash, it's very easy to be on the defensive and say, no, this does not exist, and be like an ostrich. But here we take the other approach and say, I'm really sorry. This is the reason why it happened. We will resolve it. We will get back to you. So then the employee does not feel embarrassed. The employee does not feel that me being an advocate on social media platform about something I genuinely like is not going to create backlash for me. I think that was a very simple insight that we had as a B2C company, because we have millions of customers. Some of them are going to be unhappy. And then how do you ensure that you empower every one of the 1,500 people to use social media, amplify what the brand is already talking about in their own genuine voice, but at the same time don't worry about what is happening. The other aspect that I want to touch upon on the social media use itself is that while we have broad guidelines, we are not very hung up on brand guidelines adherence to the 100%. We say that every single person is a wake fitter, and so you say what you have to say because we trust you. So when they go and say, this is what I liked in onboarding, this is what I loved on my first week of working here, this is what I loved because they give me a lot of freedom, and so on and so forth, it really changes the game where we are saying that we trust you, you go do what you want to do. I think that's how we have used social media very, very powerfully.
And then just to add, social media is a double-edged sword, right? So the whoever is doing a posting has to be extremely responsible to ensure that you post. I remember one of my friends joined a new company, and after pandemic started opening up, he went to UK and met all his team members, and he posted a photo of the team. I met the team today, etc., etc. And prompt somebody said, where is the gender diversity in this team? Okay, so it creates a lot of backlash if you are not responsive properly in what you're doing, etc. And you have to keep on thinking that what you're doing can have an impact coming in. Obviously, he recovered through that, and then he changed his team, and the company is talking a lot about gender diversity, ethnic diversity, etc. And that became an eye-opener, saying that in his team, there is no gender diversity available, etc. So that becomes extremely important. Today, every organization uses Yammer for all internal communication, etc. Managers are encouraged to participate and engage with the employees from a Yammer perspective. I don't know whether future Instagram is going to become a way of operational for the organization to engage with the employees. I don't know. But obviously, that's a powerful tool, and every employer would like to avail of it.
Rama, just to extend on that, there are detractors everywhere, and we don't want, I'm not talking about the trolls, but I'm talking about with democratized employee voice, there are detractors. How much of it do you take? How much of it do you, where do you draw the line in terms of taking in feedback versus continuously realigning your employee branding strategies?
So one of our mantras in the organization is curiosity. So that already tells you that as a company, anybody who comes in, we encourage people to be curious and voice their opinion. The other thing for us, among our 4 brand stands, as we call it, is we are not a culture fit organization, we are a culture add organization. So that lets people know that you don't have to come in and try to fit what we are doing. It's completely fine to come in and say, this is not working, and you can do this in a different manner. So to your point, I think creating that environment, telling people it's actually very normal to be different. In fact, if you fit in, that's kind of a little odd because you are coming from elsewhere. It is a great way to kind of get people to rethink and be very open. And once you enable people, I think they're always responsible. You may have some one-offs, but that's okay. You kind of deal with it.
On the topic of evolution, like you touched upon, I do want to spend the last couple of minutes looking to the future, as this year's theme is pivoting to the future. Generation Alpha, Anshuman. Generation Alpha is, like we've all discussed, they're completely different than anything we've seen in the past. They're very expressive. We had Lissy Priya here as well, who was a climate activist. How do we prepare for Generation Alpha? And what changes do organizations need to start preparing for to become future ready?
Yeah, I feel like, any company will have a kind of a demographical construct, right? For us, especially when we look at it from India perspective, 70% of our hires are early career. And so when you have such a large population of folks who are just coming out of campus for the first time, in a corporate environment, you have to make sure that there is a bridge, right, that they have where they can continue to express themselves, but they do it in a different environment, right? So instead of kind of waiting for it to happen on its own, you can actually shape it. And the way we try to do it is by creating these employee networks and communities, right? Because, and so we have the next generation network within India. What this actually does is it creates a kind of a connection for all these folks into the corporate environment. And the way we do it is we have this buddy program. So anyone who is joining from the campus comes and becomes part of this employee network. And this is a network of all these early career hires over the years, right? So some have been in the company for some time. And so what happens is when they come inside the organization, they already have folks who have gone through that journey. And so they can ask them questions, they can try to understand what's happening, which particular business unit is doing what, and where should they probably look at, from a career perspective. So I think the more you can create and nurture these kind of employee networks, which help people bring their whole self to work, right? It's not just about employee network focused on gender diversity, right? We also have these networks across various dimensions, right? We have a tech women at Intuit. So what I'm trying to say is you have to be very intentional about creating these opportunities where people can come and express themselves and be comfortable, right? Because if you don't create those environments, those will anyways happen, right, on their own. And I feel like the more you can be intentional about shaping those conversations, kind of owning those narratives, the better it is for you from a company perspective, because then you can understand what their beliefs and values are and how it connects with our company, and where perhaps we need to kind of create this melting pot, right, where you take the goodness of everything and then evolve your culture.
Absolutely, and I am cognizant of time, so I am going to open it up to any questions we have from the audience on employer branding. We've discussed quite a bit, and there's a lot more to cover. I think we can spend all day talking about employer branding, but I will open it up to anybody who has questions for our panelists about employer branding. I think there's someone. Can you just get a mic from the volunteer?
Audible? Yeah. Good afternoon. So my question is on post the pandemic, we have this work from home culture. So with this new generation, people coming to the workforce, and there's a generational gap between the existing employees and the new people coming in, right? So in this kind of scenario, how do you think they can adapt to the new culture? Because Gen Alpha is totally different in the way they see the work. So anybody, I would like Wakefit to answer this, because I'm from the startup side, so I think you can answer this.
I don't think I'm the right person to answer. We just worked straight through the pandemic 6 days a week, in office, in our warehouses and our factories. But I think the way we handled a little bit some of the departments which did work from home are to say that as soon as it started up, when we started coming back to office, we did something similar to having a buddy, where we got them into the office just for 2 days a week to start with, and then slowly ramped up. But in general, we just worked straight through the pandemic in office and factories. But somebody else who might have tried something different might.
Yeah, so I have seen in the organization, like you are in the office, usually will break at 11 o'clock for tea, or maybe 1 o'clock for lunch, and maybe 4 o'clock for a tea. So manager would do the same engagement with these team members when you are working from home. So let's assemble together on a Teams or any of the media platform at 11 o'clock for having a tea together. Obviously, you're not getting office tea, but you're getting your own tea or a coffee from home, or the same from a lunch, and so that your daily huddle or a weekly huddle don't change. Your behavior doesn't change, and managers have also realized that work from home is here to stay, and obviously the continuity and the growth of the organization, customer satisfaction, his or her goals can be met if there is a reduced attrition, etc. So that is getting implemented quite religiously everywhere. So maybe once in a month coming to office is what is being encouraged, but otherwise working from home is here to stay.
I'll just add to that. So we gave the flexibility to each team to deploy what's going to work for them. So that's one thing that we did. The second is we did recognize it's going to put quite a bit of burden on the managers, because managers have to deal with people who want to work out of office, people who want to be remote, some want to be fully remote. So even before we deployed this whole hybrid mode, we started to engage with managers and tell them that you have to gear up for this. You're going to need some programs. We have a buddy program regardless of whether they're straight out of college or they come lateral. But over and above that, most of the teams have been encouraged to think about Happy Friday, which is going to be hybrid. It could be online. Once a month, think about lunches. But more importantly, think of why you want to be in office and what's the purpose, and make it work in that context. And that's worked very well. So that's helped us kind of bring teams together when they need to be there, and service business as well.
Wonderful. I want to thank each one of you for being here. I think a key takeaway is, and I think someone spoke about this earlier, is it all goes back to a first principles approach to ask who are you serving and what are you serving them. I think employer branding is here to stay. I think as we evolve, as in the environment evolves and companies evolve, we need to make changes as well. So keeping authenticity, empathy at the heart of everything that we do makes for a strong employer brand. I want to thank each one of you for being here today, and thank you everyone for being part of this session.
Thank you.